Good morning, everybody. Here at Tegel and at the screens, I'm happy to have you here, and thank you for your interest to one of the most hot topics of these days. We will talk about hydrogen. Hydrogen will play a major role in the transition of our energy system now and in future. When I walked around the place here, I've realized there hasn't been as many hydrogen projects and hydrogen companies presented as this year. So we see not only a hype around the globe, we see the hype has arrived here at the GREENTECH Festival too. We will discuss why hydrogen will be needed and how we will organize to build up a global supply chain. Hydrogen is important for industries, for mobility, for the heating sector when it comes to process gas, and also when it comes to district heating. So we have experts here, and I'm very happy to introduce you shortly who we have here today. My name is Katherina Reiche. I'm CEO of Westenergie, it's a subsidiary of E.ON. We are a partner here at the GREENTECH Festival, and I have the honor to moderate this session here. With me is Stefanie Peters. She is managing partner of a medium-sized family business, which has been already founded in 1830. And for a couple of years now, she has positioned the company as an integrating solution provider in hydrogen economy. Very warm welcome, Stefanie, this morning.
Thanks.
We have here Jörg Bergmann. He is CEO of Germany's largest gas pipeline operator, Open Grid Europe. He's a colleague, as Stefanie also, with me in the National Hydrogen Council. Jörg, a very warm welcome this morning here. And last but not least, Andreas Janssen, who's responsible for Shell's hydrogen activities, especially in the mobility sector, passenger cars, road freight, aviation and marine industries. A very warm welcome. Happy to have you here, Andreas.
Thanks, Katharina.
So we will start with the first round. Jörg, let me start with you. You said last year the German government has acted as firefighters. Of course, we had to manage a severe crisis. But now it's time to develop a fire protection plan. So how far we are in implementing such a fire protection plan?
Yes, thanks, Katharina. Let me start with last year. We have this year of energy crisis, and not only politics, also the whole energy industry were acting as firefighters to ensure the energy supply with natural gas. For this, for example, we built up LNG terminals and infrastructure for it. We were successful, and this was due to team spirit and pragmatism. But looking at the energy transition, it was a lost year. And now we have to make a plan for the energy transition, how it should work. We must take care now, and we have to gain speed in the process. From our point of view, the protection plan must, on the one hand, entail renewable electrons, on the other hand, renewable hydrogen. And please keep in mind, we need the infrastructure, and we need speed for all these processes. We, as a company, are ready to take over our part to create and to deliver on a hydrogen grid. What we expect to be in place by the end of the year is a regulatory framework for such a hydrogen grid. And now we are working together on the one hand with the federal government, on the other hand with the regulator and with the gas transmission operators to implement such a plan. And this plan is threefold. First, we have to identify and confirm a hydrogen grid which can be built. The next one, to enable these investments and to come to final investment decisions still in this year, we need an appropriate regulatory framework, and looking a little bit longer, we need an integrated planning of natural gas infrastructure and hydrogen infrastructure. I'm very optimistic that we succeed to develop this element of the fire protection plan this year and can already start with the implementation.
Thank you so much. So the question and the call for action and for speed. Stefanie, when we talk in Germany about medium-sized or family-owned companies, sometimes internationally it's underestimated what this means. Family-owned business is the core of German success when it comes to economics, to export, hidden champions. But they are not found always in hotspots or in large cities. So your family business is based in Übach-Palenberg, what's close to the city of Aachen. So would you rather be based in the US now, thinking about the IRA?
Well, being a family business for more than 190 years, of course, we have our heritage in Germany, and we are strong believers in German production and also in German value chains. However, I couldn't agree more with Jörg's statement. We need speed, and the US are showing us and presenting us how uncomplicated support in the sector of investments for climate protection measures work. And we now see, and we are happy and lucky that we also have a subsidiary in the US, so we are participating in this ramp up already. However, we would like to also see the same development here in Europe and also build up the supply chains here. But just to show you two figures, when you look at what the IRA means, $370 billion for climate protection, and in comparison, we see $3 billion in Europe. And so there you can understand why investments are going into the US and why we see a lot of inquiries now building up the infrastructure, the necessary infrastructure in the US, and not yet so much in Europe.
Well, I think really that was a wake-up call, or should have been, but we still wait for the answer for proper in Europe. Europe is something, Andreas, I would like to ask you. The framework, the measures, the political measurements which should be implemented are quite complex. But when you think of your own business, what you're active in, so what are the most specific and most urgent policy measures we have to go on and we have to set in place right now?
Yeah, and let me maybe start a level higher. You mentioned it in your opening. It's fascinating to be here. So much innovation, so much enthusiasm. Hydrogen is talk of the town. If you open up a newspaper, you see a hydrogen article every day. Now, the reality is we sign MOUs, Memorandum of Understanding, we kick off projects with the aim to invest. Thus, the number of investments today is way too small. So it's not really happening. And I think it's good to look into those projects which do mature, to understand which regulation is needed, and then be very specific. At Shell, we have the luxury that we were in the position to take a final investment decision for a 200 megawatt electrolyzer last summer in the port of Rotterdam. And that will serve, initially, our own energy and chemicals park in Rotterdam to decarbonize fuels in the energy and chemicals park. Later on, that is envisaged to be used for road mobility and transport. Now, what did enable us to take this decision? Of course, being bold is one thing. The other one is having a clear ambition with targets, with intermediate targets for 2030. And there we see hydrogen will be needed. But there are basically three things you need to have in place from our perspective. First of all, demand. Secondly, the infrastructure. The third element is supply. It should start with demand. And we were in the position to supply our own assets. So demand ticked the box. Infrastructure, we could build with partners to connect the electrolyzer with the end user. And the third element then is supply, and that electrolyzer is directly connected to a wind park in the offshore. So when we talk about necessary policy measures in place, I would advocate, first of all, to stimulate demand. And I do see good examples happening right now. In Germany, CCFDs, carbon contracts for differences, are being discussed. First proposals out there. We hope they will be implemented super quickly. Same for mobility. We do see significant subsidy supports, and that vehicle works. So focus on demand, and then make very simple regulation, make pragmatic regulation for the infrastructure, and give companies such as ours and all the others who also all want to invest the security that you have reliable regulation that will enable the business cases to fly.
You mentioned a very important part, and that was the infrastructure part. So, and when we talk about infrastructure, the transport of the molecule is of very importance. So you are, I mentioned it already, you're operating as CEO of Germany's largest transport pipeline operator. OGE just recently presented a study together with the University of Stuttgart, where you try to figure out if the existing pipelines are capable for the transport. So could you give us a little bit of insight into the studies and the question, could we just switch from methane to hydrogen?
Yes, of course. As you mentioned, and as Andreas mentioned, infrastructure is key element to connect supply and demand. And to give you, first of all, the main result of the study, there are no technical restrictions to transport hydrogen by repurposing existing gas pipelines. What did we do in this research project? We looked in a representative technical study in different kinds of steel used in Germany as well in Europe. And the result is very promising. We can use existing gas pipelines for transporting of hydrogen. And the big advantage in converting an existing pipeline is twofold. First of all, it's much cheaper, much more cost effective, because it's only 20% of the cost to reshape it for the hydrogen transport compared to building a new pipeline, and it's much faster. And as I mentioned, we have to gain speed, and so it is the right way. We, as a company, are engaged in several projects which we kicked off for hydrogen transportation. And what is missing? It is the framework. I mentioned the framework on the German level. We now started a very dynamic process there, and I'm optimistic, but we have also to look to Brussels. And there is a gas market package. It's discussed already for a very lengthy period. And we need gas transportation and hydrogen transportation under the same umbrella. No additional unbundling rules. I don't want to end up in a situation where the US is producing hydrogen and Brussels is producing ordinances.
That is true. If you should explain very, very simple, what does it mean to convert an existing pipeline? So for non-technicians, what could it be? The valves, pumps? So what are the 20% what we have to exchange? As I understood, the pipelines we can use, they are existing 550,000 kilometers in Germany. That's a lot.
So we looked at our hydrogen, it's our high pressure pipelines. And high pressure means 60 bar, 80 bar, 100 bar. And the pipelines can be used directly. We have to look at the armatures, we have to look at the gas metering and pressure station. They might be exchanged, And we did it in our company on a on a pipeline-to-pipeline examination. That means we looked at every pipeline which we would like to convert, looked at every point of the pipeline, every issue. Is it eligible for hydrogen? Is it also, are there the right certificates? And that's a lot. What is a little bit a challenge, but that's more the business of Stefanie, is the compressors. The existing gas compressors cannot be used for hydrogen. They have to be replaced. But this is not an obstacle, because the lifetime of a pipeline is much more longer than the service time of a compressor.
Thank you. So very, I think, positive news that we don't have to build everything new. And if you can use existing pipeline, also the pushback from people who could be worried about new huge infrastructure project, we can say, be quiet, we use the existing ones. Stefanie, I will you ask to that infrastructure part also, but first, Andreas, the National Hydrogen Council assumes that the H2 demand will rise up to 32 terawatt hours in the transport sector for 2030. So how can the necessary infrastructure be ramped up and accelerated?
32 terawatt hours, that's massive. I do believe people underestimate the amount of hydrogen needed. And what comes with that is the infrastructure. Hydrogen retail sites, as one example, refueling opportunities for shipping industry and the aviation industry. Two things I would like to highlight. This can only work if companies partner together, because you have this classical challenge of a chicken and the egg. What comes first? Infrastructure players can invest if there are trucks, for example, in the road transport. At the same time, OEMs, automotive OEMs, can only invest if the infrastructure is available. So partnering up, bringing those closely together, making joint commitments is one vehicle to embed the infrastructure. The second one is coming back to the point of regulation. Also, the regulatory landscape needs to be shaped in a way that it allows both industries to invest. I do see very positive signals. We had in Brussels earlier this year the AFIR regulation, AFIR's alternative fuels for infrastructure regulation, which will require the member states to set up hydrogen retail sites. 32 terawatt hours, massive. If AFIR is being implemented timely, we will see more than close to 1,000 sites across Europe. On the OEM side, at the moment, there is a package being discussed for the heavy-duty vehicle CO2 regulation. Again, if that is going through, that will drive investment into hydrogen for trucking, and it comes together.
Thank you very much. Stefanie, I wanted to ask you also for the infrastructure part, because NEUMAN at ESSER is a very important supplier for the gas grid business, but also you have the hydrogen economy and the demand side also in mind. So what is the current demand, what you see as integrated service provider?
Yes. First of all, just to explain what is an integrated solution, what we understand under integrated solution. And this really should solve the hen and egg problem. That means we would like to combine the on-site hydrogen generation, transportation, storage, and also the application in one spot. So we are talking about an ecosystem which has a business model in itself and works as a decentralized solution. This can also speed up the whole process, because we can take smaller steps and starting right now, and then at a later stage combining these decentralized solutions. We think that we need both. We need the big perspective, we need lighthouse projects, but we also need these decentralized solutions. So how do we consider the demand at the moment? Worldwide, in the hydrogen economy, there is more than 1,000 projects of a size higher than 1 megawatt. And we get a lot of inquiries, and we see that about half of the inquiries consider these integrated solutions where we also look for the application for the demand side, and we develop the demand side at the same time as the generation side. And the other 50% are coming from industries which are established, like Shell, like industries coming from traditional applications, and they know exactly what they need. They can care for the application and the demand themselves, or they have it already, and they specify which products they need. Is it a compressor? Is it a storage? Is it maybe an electrolyzer, as Shell invested in? So we see it's both sides, also internationally. So we're not only talking about Germany or Europe. We see the same demand in Asia and also, of course, in US and South America.
Thank you. I think that's always important to mention that we are not the only place who think about it. This is a global race. We have to really be step up. Andreas, you mentioned the transport sector. Sometimes I have the feeling we misunderstand a little bit what transport is. A lot of people think then about the individual car. Transport sector is much, much more. So could you a little bit explain where do you see kind of a merit order when it comes to transport and hydrogen, and where the solutions are?
It's a super critical question because it is indeed largely misunderstood. Hydrogen is not the one and only solution which fits everywhere. Hydrogen should go in those sectors which you cannot easily electrify. We do believe that for passenger cars, for individual transport, actually battery electric is the right solution. Now, there are some sectors in the transport area which are hard to abate, where pure electricity stored in battery will be limited also in the future. Those sectors are marine, aviation, and to some extent the commercial road transport, so the really heavy-duty trucking. On the heavy-duty trucking side, we do see in the long term both opportunities. Battery electrics rather for distribution, short haul, 300 kilometers, 400 kilometers range, where customers can go back to the depot and recharge overnight and do maybe partly on-the-go charging. But for transport with more than 500, 800 kilometers per day, traveling, assuming from Poland to Spain, which is the majority of heavy-duty road transport, we will need to rely on hydrogen. Marine aviation probably will come a bit later, and it's not necessarily only need hydrogen, but you can also look at the derivatives, such as methanol, ammonia, or synthetic LNG for those sectors.
Thank you. Thank you very much for these explanations. Jörg, I would come back to the current regulation we see from Brussels and also here in Germany. The current regulation is based on a model which permanent gas network operation has in mind. Now you explain you have to switch step by step existing gas pipelines towards hydrogen. So to understand the obstacles a little bit more, what would be an ideal framework to do this switch from gas to hydrogen? What you need as a pipeline operator?
Yeah, first of all, let me start. The grid is colorblind. Huh? It doesn't matter if you push for the grid, if you transport fossil elements or CO2 neutral elements. Huh? And that is our chance. Huh? And looking how it should work with repurposing of pipelines, we have to identify pipelines which are not needed anymore for gas transportation in the first step. And for example, this can be pipelines which were transported low calorific gas. You have this conversion from low calorific gas to high calorific gas in some parts of Germany. And we have also to take into account what will be the demand decrease in natural gas. And the problem with the regulatory framework you mentioned, Katherina, is still a challenge. We have to build in some incentives of repurposing existing pipelines because it's much more faster and much more cost efficient compared to build new pipelines. These instruments we have to analyze and to develop them together with politics, with the regulator, and you know it as well as I know it. It's a process which is not solved in a week, but we have to speed up.
Exactly, speed up. Stefanie, I would go back to you because you're really a global player. We could talk hours about all the different management and policy fields which has to be somehow connected for hydrogen ramp up. If you look at your own company and you have the global view, what policy measures would have the biggest impact to really come to a ramp up and to come to speed?
I think definitely demand needs to be incentivized. Because once there's demand, then you have a planning security and there will be investments into infrastructure and into the generation of hydrogen for sure. However, we shouldn't forget that establishing infrastructure takes time. So we are looking at a period of 5 to 7 years until this infrastructure is in place. So we really don't have time to wait, and that's why things have to happen very quickly. And this is what we see better at the moment in the US, in Korea, in China, in other parts of the world, in South America, in Brazil. And I think there Germany really has to learn from the others and be much quicker than now.
So is the carbon contract for difference designed in Germany in a proper answer to the IRA?
I think it is a good first step. However, it's very complex. And I think it should be less complex. It has to be more pragmatic, and it has to also be available for everyone. And this is not the case at the moment. So I think it's a good step, but it should be much easier to deal with.
So it should be a regulation where we can learn in and not have to think perfect from the very beginning.
Exactly. We have to take the first step and then learn together. And that will speed up the process and not try to have the perfect vision and then never start.
Andreas, there's an instrument which also the former government has set up. The current government is planning to boost and develop further. I'm speaking about H2 Global. H2 Global as foundation, and the task is to combine demand, supply, and production. H2 Global now looks very much to the producer, was good on the one side, as a supplier and then trader or user of hydrogen. What would you say, how would we should change the current framework of H2 Global, not only to meet the requirements of the producer, but also for the off-taker?
You touched on a very important point, which we haven't addressed in this panel yet. Long time, we will produce hydrogen potentially outside of Europe, where sun and electricity at the end of the day is cheap. Now, the hydrogen will go from those production areas to the markets with the best commercial conditions, with the best business conditions. H2 Global is a fantastic element to set this up for Germany, and needs to go beyond Germany. It needs to be Europe. And I'm pleased to see that there is a connection now between the Hydrogen Bank in Europe and H2 Global. What can we do to make this tool even stronger? And it is about not only supply tenders, but also demand tenders. Long-term demand contracts will be needed to supply or to support companies such as ours to properly invest. So it's global play, demand investment, and then speed. Speed. It's the race. At the moment, I'm deeply convinced it's a race.
The secure of demand that you say is a blind spot right now in Germany. Okay. Stefanie, do you think that we can reach our ambitions in Germany? We will see hopefully soon the new national hydrogen strategy. As far as I know now, we have a slight increase of some goal or achievements we want to reach. Do you think that's enough, or are you either worried that we don't even achieve the previous goals?
I think we have to try, and we should all go together and convince the government to also speed up. But just to give you an idea, the 10 gigawatt in electrolysis installed in 2030 means that every day we have to install 4 megawatt each day. And so that just to understand what it means to be able to reach the goals. And I think that really means we have to start today and not wait more years to come for the right decisions.
So we have to start today. It's a conclusion we have to and can draw here out. Thank you very much to our panelists here, and thank you for your attention, and thank you for being here this morning.